Hello, my name is Joseph MacDonald. I am a non-traditional student here at St. Cloud State University. My wife and I have three children, all under the age of 8 years old, so it makes it a little bit fun at times. Before coming back to school last spring, for the past decade plus, I was working in the private sector of banking, finance, and the mortgage industry. It was not something that I felt to be challenging or meaningful anymore, and I made a decision to make a career change, go back to school and pursue becoming a physician, which is what I really want to do. Okay, I guess a little bit more about religion. Um, when I was young, I was reared Catholic. My grandfather is actually a deacon for some 40 plus years. Um, when I was young, I had a pretty strong relationship with organized religion, but as I grew older, and just instances in life happened, I grew disillusioned with organized religion, and through my teenage years largely described myself as agnostic, or not convinced there was God. The older I've gotten, the more I've found religion can actually be very useful and bring value to people's lives. Like any tool, it can be used or misused. It really just depends about your intention and kind of the value supposition. If you're using it more as a moral guideline, or how it enriches your life or your culture. Um, Dr. Sharp, excuse me, raised two questions that I thought were really interesting. And rather than adding my own two non sequitur questions, I actually wanted to expand upon those questions. I believe he asked, how is it possible regarding the Bible that the very same text can be read or interpreted in totally different ways? So, on that first question, I wanted to kind of unpack that too. Um, from what little bit I do know historically about how the Bible came to be written, for a long time, the Old Testament was verbally passed down. And it wasn't until many, many years later that it was first written down, I think by like John the Baptist was credited for putting this into formal writing. But I think early on it was ancient Aramaic, which is kind of like a predecessor to ancient Hebrew, and then later transcribed into Greek, and then Latin into German. So the iteration of the New Testament and Old Testament that we see in, like, for instance, the King James Bible today has gone through many different translations. So I find it interesting when you talk about the same script or scripture can be interpreted in different ways. Well, that could be because perhaps the diction that we see in today maybe is not the most accurate interpretation of how it was originally represented. Um, so how does that play into how those things can get misinterpreted or misinterpreted or interpreted completely differently? Um, could be lost in translation, if you will. But to add on to that, there's also a thing with not just what is stated explicitly in text, but what is implied in subtext. And I think perhaps that can also be important in trying to interpret meaning or intention behind words that are deemed sacred. So that is probably how very different interpretations or ways can be derived just from a technical standpoint with linguistics. Um, but then you also have to frame cultural context that people are reading from and how they may arrive at different conclusions. Um, On to his second question, and again, um, Dr. Sharp was clever enough to have these questions, and these are questions I myself had coming into this class. How religion can be both a force of good and also manipulated as a I guess a force of evil, if you will, or harm or malevolence, i.e., crusades. Spanish Inquisition, just to name a few of Christianity's, I guess, blights in history. Um, I think stepping outside of religion and looking at it more from psychology, perhaps when you are convinced you are committing evil in the name of something that is good, it can be justified. Um, we, we are complex animals. We're more than animals, but we're really complex animals. And I think we can rationalize lots of different actions if it's done in the name of the greater good. Um, so yeah, rather than asking my own questions, I wanted to add layers onto Dr. Sharp's questions and perhaps take a stab at maybe addressing why. Um, but yeah, that's a little bit about me, a little bit about my background with religion. Like I said, nowadays I've come around to appreciating religion. I sort of treat it like a really useful mythology that maybe happened, maybe it didn't happen, I don't know. Um, but there are also lots of different versions of truth. So anyway, that's me. I'm Joseph MacDonald, and I look forward to the class.